Okay, we're looking at this question here in macroeconomics. The first one is discuss critically GDP as a measure of economic welfare. So, this is how we do it. So, GDP, which is the gross domestic product, is the total value of goods and services produced within a country. It includes even foreign businesses that are producing within a country. They also contribute to a country's GDP. Then economic welfare is basically the well-being of citizens in a country. Are the citizens living good or not? All right. So here are some of the reasons why GDP is not accurate in measuring the well-being of citizens, which is economic welfare. First one, income inequality. The gross domestic product doesn't show how income is distributed, and a high GDP doesn't mean that income is distributed equally within a nation. There's always going to be the gaps of the poor and the rich. So in the tabulations of GDP, we don't know how the income is distributed, if it's distributed equally or not. But in reality, what we see with every nation, there's always going to be the poor side and the wealthy side. Second one is non-market activities. Basically, these are the activities which you do at home, like let's say household work, volunteering, and caregiving. Let's say if you've got a business selling food at your house, that won't be included in the GDP. Any jobs that you do basically at home and which are small and private, that's not going to be included in the GDP. And that business, it can be doing you well, you can be making money from that business you do at home, all right? But since it's not included in the GDP tabulations, you won't know how many household activities people in a nation are doing. Third is quality of life in terms of healthcare, education. The GDP figures won't tell you that on the calculations. All right. So if a country has got the public hospitals are bad, the transportation systems are bad, healthcare and education are bad, you won't know that. And though a country can have a high GDP, but factors like how the public services are to the people, that won't be incorporated and you wouldn't know that. And finally, environmental impact. So the GDP doesn't account for the damage that is done to the environment by these industries and factories that are producing, which contribute to our GDP. So we know, like mines, when the wastes from mines really affect people living in those communities that are near the mines. It can be air pollution, water pollution, and that pollution can be affecting the people living within those industries and factories. And basically, those people won't be enjoying life because that's going to be making their life a bit difficult to live with. So, while many factories and industries can contribute to a high GDP, we're not accounting for the harmful effects and how they're affecting the citizens in that country. Any questions or queries? Okay, we can move to part B. Given that this S represents the savings function. It's just showing the relationship between saving and your income. So let's S equals negative 100 plus 0.2y. I equals 200. I represents investment. All right. So this 200 is representing the investment that has been done within a nation. So it can be 200 million, 200 billion. So the first part, they want us to find equilibrium Y. So basically what equilibrium Y is representing, the national income of a country at equilibrium. So there are two ways you can do it. So with the information that has been given to us here, we're going to use the withdrawals equals injections method. If you remember from the circular flow diagram, withdrawals from the circular flow diagram, we have savings, taxes, and imports. This is where money is coming out of our economy, all right? Then we've also got injections where money is being put in the economy, and injections represent investment, government spending, and exports. So we are going to equate the two. Withdrawals equals injections. So with the withdrawals, we've got our savings, which are represented by the savings function, negative 100 plus 0.2y. Let me just use the board so that, because most people prefer the board. So we're saying savings equals injections. So from the question of savings was negative 100 plus 0.2y. The injections we have investment with, let's see, 200. So here basically we're trying to solve for y. Right? Y represents the national income. So we're just going to group like terms together. So this negative 100, we're going to take it over to the other side. So we have 0.2y equals 200 plus 100. It's going to give us 300. So to get the value of y, we divide both sides by 0.2. So 300 divided by 0.2, that gives us 1,500. Which represents the national income at equilibrium. Any questions, colleagues? So if you ever seen a question where they're asking you to find equilibrium y and you have savings, sometimes they might also give you taxes, they might also give you imports. And then on the injection side, you can have investment, you can also have government spending, you can also have exports. The given of that information, you can use the injections equals withdrawals. The other method you can use is y equals c plus I plus g plus x minus n. Remember, at equilibrium, the money that is spent is equal to the money that is earned. So, and if we can remember, this represents the formula, or this represents aggregate demand, this c plus I plus g plus x minus n. And aggregate demand is equal to also aggregate expenditure. So we could have used this method if we were given the consumption function, but here we're given the savings function. And the second part of the question, I believe, is to find the consumption function. Consumption function shows the relationship between your spending and your income. So in order to get our consumption function, you must remember that when you get your money, there are two things you can do with it. You can either spend, which is consumption, or you can save. So we want to find the value of, we want to find C, which is the consumption function here. So first of all, we make C the subject of the formula. So C is equal to y minus S. Right, we have taken this S over this side. And then we have y minus, so we now substitute S with our savings function, which was negative 100 plus 0.2y. So the first thing you need to do is to distribute the negative sign. So you're going to say negative 1 times 100, that's positive 100. Negative 1 times 0.2y, you get negative 0.2y. So here we've got our y. So we're going to operate with the like terms. So this y is the same as saying 1y. Okay. 1y minus 0.2y, you're going to get 0.8y. So this is our consumption function. And the verses find the equilibrium value of the consumption function. So we already found national income at equilibrium, that was 1,500. So what we're going to do, we're going to substitute 1,500 for this y here in our consumption function. So once 0.8 times 1,500, you get 1,200. So 100 plus 1,200, you're going to get 1,300. And that's the value of the consumption function at equilibrium. We've got, we can go now to part C. Illustrate with the use of aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagrams how each of the following is likely to affect GDP. So the first scenario, we have environmental laws prohibiting firms from emitting pollution. So before we go there, let's draw our aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph. So hold on. So on our y-axis, we have price level, like in microeconomics where you had just the price of one good. Here in macroeconomics is the price level of various goods within a nation. Then on our x-axis, we have real GDP output. If you remember in micro, you had just the output of one good, but here it's the output of various goods within a nation. So say real GDP output. All right, we have our aggregate demand curve, which is downward sloping. Aggregate demand is just the total demand for the goods and services within a nation. So aggregate, just think of the word aggregate as the total. All right. And the shifters of our aggregate demand curve: consumer expenditure by us, the citizens; investment expenditure by the businesses; government expenditure, and government is spending was building new infrastructure, roads, hiring new teachers, and the likes. And then we've got our net exports. Right? When we're exporting more goods, it means foreigners are demanding our goods more. Then we have our short run aggregate supply curve. In macroeconomics, the short run is when wages are fixed. All right. If the price level of goods go up, you cannot go to your employee the next day and to your employer the next day and ask for a wage raise. All right. You cannot, because you've got a contract with them. All right. So you can't just go there and say, I need a salary increment. That would be impossible. So in the short run, this is when wages are fixed. And the shifters: technology, actions of government in terms of policies, regulations, tariffs, quotas, subsidies, taxes, and finally the price of resources. Price of resources, these are the price of the raw materials, wages for the workers, Yes, those are the so these are the three things that shift. Just remember this acronym: PAT or TAP. All right. T, technology. A, actions of government. P is the price of resources. Then we have the long run aggregate supply, which is here. In the long run, wages are flexible, meaning you can even quit your job to go and look for a job which is paying higher. Or when your contract finishes, you can negotiate a higher salary. So in the long run, this straight line represents our GDP output if we utilize our factors of production efficiently. Factors of production: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. So this point here is called the real GDP output at full employment of these factors of production. So this is how the curve has to be. So now we look at our first scenario. Oh, the shifters of this one is the same as the short run, but you also can include trade with other nations. So environmental laws prohibit firms from emitting pollution. So this is government has enacted the law. So then it means that here they're telling the businesses and the industries that you're polluting too much and you need to cut down on the pollution. Meaning you need now to be your processes need to be cleaner and they have to be environmental friendly. Now we all know these cleaner processes and environmental friendly processes can be quite a cost. They can be expensive, especially to some of these factories, right? And most of these factories don't even want to take that cost up. So what is going to mean, since factories are polluting, it means they need to scale back on production so that the pollution reduces until they can now find better methods of producing the materials they're making. Then they can increase production. But for now, since the environmental laws are prohibiting these firms from polluting, so they'll have to scale back on production. And remember, one of the shifters of the short run aggregate supply is actions of government. So production is going to be cut down by these industries. Because if an industry continues producing the way it's producing and is still emitting pollution, government is going to act. So they'll have to scale back on production. So we have a shift to the left for short run aggregate supply. So what we're going to let's see what happens to price level and what happens to the GDP output. So here we have point A. This is our equilibrium price level. Now, due to this shift in aggregate supply, we notice that price levels go up and real GDP output is going to go down. So for this type of question, after you draw the graph, explain what happens to price level and real GDP output. And since these firms scale back on production, it means some workers might be laid off. So those laid off workers now become unemployed. So it means the unemployment rate can rise. since workers have been laid off. So remember, this graph shows three macroeconomic goals: unemployment, how we want lower unemployment. We want the second thing it also illustrates is economic growth through GDP. And the third thing it illustrates is inflation through price level. So whenever you're answering questions based on this graph, you have to talk about what happens to price level, unemployment, and real GDP output. That's how you get all your marks. Price level, unemployment, real GDP output, you say what happens to them. So here in this case here, price level has gone up. The unemployment rate has also gone up because firms have laid off workers and they've cut down on production. And when they cut down on production, it means our GDP is going to reduce. So that is for scenario one. Scenario two, strikes by trade unions. Workers are striking, probably they want higher wages and better working conditions. And we know the workers are what make our factories productive. So if the workers are striking, meaning there are no workers in the factory, meaning the factory is not won't even be producing. Maybe it might produce a bit without the workers, but if the workers are not there, production is going to reduce. So again, in this scenario, our short run aggregate supply curve moves to the left. So the same thing here. Price levels go up, real GDP output goes down. Those workers who are striking, they're undergoing frictional unemployment, temporary unemployment. They're not working, they're staying at home due to the strikes. Yeah, so you can say unemployment can also go up. But if they're striking and come back the next day, then unemployment really wouldn't get that affected, and also productivity. So for scenario two, it's the same thing. Short run aggregate supply is going to shift to the left. Part three, discoveries of new seed increases farm harvest. So this new seed, when you plant it, your harvest, let's say it doubles. And if your harvest doubles, it means you're able to supply more. So this one can put it under technology. Remember the shifts of short run aggregate supply. Technology is one of the first there. So we've got aggregate demand here, aggregate supply here. So since this new seed increases the harvest, it means we can supply more. So short run aggregate curve is going to shift to the right. So let's see what happens to price level. So due to this shift, we have price level going down. So we have an increase in our real GDP output. So as these farms supplying more of this fruit, I don't know, vegetable, they are going to also need to acquire now new land, plant more of those seeds. And what will they do? They'll need to hire some workers. So as they hire the workers, the unemployment rate goes down. The unemployment rate goes down. So this is what's going to happen in scenario 3.